Good morning again, children. So, yesterday we looked at the river Amazon and you found out some information about the Amazon. We also looked at some of the words that we might need to use when we are describing the river, any river really. We know that when we're finding facts about rivers, we need to know about the length of the river, what ocean or sea it flows into, where it starts, what country it goes through, what landmark features it goes past, does it have any tributaries, what cities does it flow through, how is the river used, and what wildlife is on the river. We know those things. And you now know all of these words. These are the technical words to describe parts of a river. They're not all the words that we would use to describe parts of the river, but they are the technical words that we would use today. What we're going to do today is you're going to need a pencil and just some paper again, because today's job is to make notes on the River Thames. So I'm going to pause the video for a moment while you go and get yourself a pen and a piece of paper, and then we'll come back to it in a moment. Okay, so today we're going to find out about the River Thames. Okay, so the River Thames, it's a famous river that flows through London. So where does it start? The source of the River Thames, referred to as Thames Head, is 3.5 miles southwest of Cirencester. It is the longest river entirely in England. So we might have some other rivers that might be longer, but they maybe start or flow into Scotland or Wales. This is the longest river that its entire body of water comes from England. And you can see that we might say that Cirencester is the source of the river, but in actual fact, it's probably just outside that town, the town of Cirencester. You can see the little picture here, and it says, the source of the river is marked by a large stone which says the conservation of the River Thames, 1857 to 1974. And it says this stone was placed here to mark the source of the River Thames. So there's a stone saying this is exactly the place where the river starts, which is quite interesting because lots of rivers have got a source that is disputed, that people don't know where it starts, but it's very clear where the River Thames starts. And the source of the River Thames is 108.5 metres above sea level, so it's on higher ground. We mentioned before that rivers often start on higher ground and work their way down to lower ground and eventually to the ocean. Okay, so here are some facts about the River Thames. Its length, it's 346 kilometres long. Starts just outside Cirencester. Now the mouth of the River Thames is an estuary. It's the Thames estuary. Do you remember, an estuary is where fresh water meets salt water. Fresh water from the river meets salt water from the ocean or the sea. And if you remember, that water is then described as brackish. And it flows into the North Sea. Here are some places that the river passes through: Oxford, Reading, Henley-on-Thames and Windsor. And here are some of the uses for the River Thames: rowing and sailing and fishing and transport. When you're in London, you can get on a boat to take you to different parts of London. It's like a ferry boat that takes you up and down the Thames to different parts of London. So historically, the Thames was used for transport too. Okay, now, unlike the Amazon, the River Thames has got lots of bridges. There was one famous bridge called London Bridge, and it's often been confused with the picture at the beginning of this presentation, which was Tower Bridge. Now, the original London Bridge was built in 1830, and it was made famous by the song London Bridge is Falling Down. In 1967, it was dismantled because it wasn't able to cope with all the traffic that was going on it. And it was sold to Robert P. McCulloch from London, who had it moved brick by brick and reconstructed in Arizona in the USA. Some people say that he thought he was getting Tower Bridge and was disappointed when London Bridge arrived. Now, this is Tower Bridge. This is the famous, iconic bridge in London. Tower Bridge was opened in 1894 and at the time was the largest bascule bridge in the world. These bascules are the two central lower parts that lift up. That's these bits here. You can see these bits here that lift up for all tall boats and ships to pass under the bridge. It took 8 years to build and 432 construction workers, and it also had 11,000 tonnes of steel. It's an iconic building in London and is known around the world as well as playing host to events such as the London Marathon. So often people run across the bridge for the London Marathon. Now, there's another use for the River Thames. It says here, stink and stench. For many years, most of the city's rubbish, food and toilet waste was dumped into the river. In 1858, the smell coming from the river was so disgusting that Parliament, which is on the banks of the Thames, had to be suspended, had to close it for a while. Consequently, the government decided to find a way to rid the Thames of sewage. Along came Sir Joseph Bazalgette, who built a sewerage system for London. Now, you often see pictures of the frozen River Thames. Now, before the 19th century, cold winter temperatures would sometimes freeze the surface of the Thames, and frost fairs would be held on the ice, where Londoners would dance and skate and drink. The last fair was in 1814, and it appears unlikely that there will ever be another one because the river now flows too quickly for water to freeze. Another famous landmark along the River Thames is the Tower of London. It's a special gate here where people would be brought up the River Thames and sent into the Tower of London by a gate right through there. Since 1066, when William the Conqueror founded it, the Tower of London has stood on the north bank of the Thames. Over its long history, the Tower of London has hosted kings and queens, as well as being a prison. Today, it houses the crown jewels and is looked after by the beef eaters. People and goods arrived and left via the River Thames through a door in the walls called the Sally Port, and you can see it there, the Sally Port. Transport. The Thames had an important role in the transportation of goods and people. During Tudor times, London prospered as a port and a centre of world trade, and in 1510 Henry VIII granted licences to watermen, giving them exclusive rights to carry passengers on the river. Interestingly, it was also the River Thames that hosted Henry VIII's final journey as his body was taken by boat from Whitehall, where he died, to Windsor, where he was buried. The Thames Tunnel. The Thames Tunnel is an underwater tunnel travelling 23 metres below the river from Rotherhithe to Wapping. It is 11 metres wide and 6 metres high and 396 metres long. It was built by Mark Isambard Brunel and his son Isambard Kingdom Brunel in 1825 and 1840, between 1825 and 1843, using the then newly invented tunnelling shield. The tunnel was supposed to be used for horse-drawn carriages, but it never was. Now it's part of the London Overground Railway and owned by Transport for London. The boat race. Every spring there is a rowing race of 6.8 kilometres between Oxford and Cambridge universities along the River Thames from Putney to Mortlake. The first race was in 1829 for the men in Henley-on-Thames, following a challenge between old school friends. Since the second race in 1836, the contest has taken place in London, and women took part in their first race in 1927. The record time over the course is 16 minutes and 19 seconds, set by Cambridge in 1998. The Thames Barrier. The Thames Barrier is downstream of central London. It was built in 1982 to prevent high tides flooding Greater London. When needed, it is closed, which means it's raised up during the high tide, and at low tide, it can be opened to allow the river to flow again towards the sea. So, just like the Amazon, the Thames is a river that will flood, and it changes its tide from high tide to low tide. So, it's a tidal river, and that means that the water can be higher at different times. Now, you've had some facts about the River Thames there, but your job for the rest of today is to find out some more. Find out something else about the River Thames. You might want to find out what wildlife lives on the River Thames. You might want to find out something about the cities that the River Thames flows through. You might want to find out about the little bit more about the tributaries, because we haven't heard anything about the tributaries for the river, or the size of its basin. We don't know the size of the River Thames basin. Those might be things that you want to think about and find out about before tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to start having to think about writing about the rivers.